All right. Welcome to Soul Talks. My name is Dr. Nicholas Hudson, and I have the privilege of serving as the director of the Office of Student Orientation, Leadership, and Engagement here at TAMIU. I also serve as a co-chair of the TAMIU All in Democracy Task Force, which aims to increase the overall levels of democratic engagement, small d democratic engagement, here at TAMIU. We have a wonderful Soul Talks event for today entitled The Impact of Gen Z on the 2020 election. We have a panel of Gen Z student leaders who engaged in the political process, and I will serve as the moderator for this nonpartisan event. To start, let's address some housekeeping information. For our audience that is here with us today, please mute yourself as there will be an opportunity to ask questions later on. As we begin, the Soul Office would like to remind folks that the views expressed during this event are not necessarily endorsed nor supported by Texas A&M International University, the Board of Regents, the Texas A&M University System, or the Office of Student Orientation, Leadership, and Engagement. By policy, Texas A&M International University is required to remain neutral in political activities. The use of TAMIU facilities and properties by candidates and political organizations does not necessarily imply or indicate support for any candidate or political party. So, now that we've gotten some of those housekeeping events out of the way, we're going to go ahead and have a conversation with some of our panelists as we move through here. So, to start off with, introducing our panelists, if you wouldn't mind, please letting me know your name, major, classification, and what organization you are representing. I will go ahead and call on the first one, which will be Alyssa Wallace.
Hey y'all, my name is Alyssa Wallace. I am studying political science with a minor in communications. I'm a junior this year. I'm really excited for that. And today I'm representing Move TAMIU. I'm also joined by one of my VP, Isabella Barrientos.
Wonderful. We're going to go next to Cecilia Jimenez.
Hi, everyone. My name's Cecilia. Everyone kind of calls me Ceci. And I'm currently a senior at TAMIU, and I'm majoring in a double major in political science and sociology. And I'm here representing the Political Science Association of TAMIU.
Wonderful. And I know that our friends from the TAMIU College Democrats will be joining us as well, but they don't seem to be here at the moment. And so we're just going to go ahead and move on to our special guest as well. So, born and raised in Laredo, Texas, Jessica Cisneros is the proud daughter of Mexican immigrant farm workers who came to the United States more than 30 years ago in search of the American dream. Her parents' immigrant experience and her life growing up on the border inspired her to become an immigration attorney to provide legal assistance like the one provided to her parents many years ago. Jessica transferred her coursework to the University of Texas at Austin after attending TAMIU, while at the Early College High School in Laredo. She then went on to earn her Juris Doctorate at law school at the University of Texas School of Law, where she was an immigration pro bono scholar and received the Dean's Achievement Award for Outstanding Student in the study of immigration law. After working with folks detained at the Hutto, Carnes, and Laredo Detention Center in Texas, Jessica created her own 9-month fellowship to participate in the first in the nation public defender model for detained people in immigration proceedings at Brooklyn Defender Services. After a career detour run for Congress to represent Texas' 28th Congressional District, Jessica immediately returned to pushing back against the Trump administration and is now doing immigration and human rights work at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid as a staff attorney. A Forbes' 30 Under 30 honoree, Jessica's dream is to one day establish a universal representation program for people in immigration proceedings and close immigration detention centers for good. And so that is our special guest for today. And so welcome here, Jessica. We'll get to you in a second, but I see Christian is here. So Christian, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, your major, your classification, as well as your organization that you are representing.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christian Ochoa. I am a political science major, minor in communications, and I am a sophomore, however, first-time student. And I am representing the TAMIU College Democrats.
And so thank all of our panelists for coming in. Once again, this is a nonpartisan event. And it's really discussing with our four panelists here the impact of Gen Z. And so before we get into the actual conversation and discussion, I did want to, it's Soul Talks. We like to do a little bit of educating as well. So let's turn our attention to actually describe Gen Z. So 1 in 10 eligible voters in the 2020 electorate will be part of this generation, new generation of Americans, Gen Z. Gen Z are those born after 1996, and most members are not old enough yet to vote, but the oldest among them will turn 23 this year and will represent roughly 24 million who will have the opportunity to cast a ballot here in November. And their political clout will continue to grow steadily in the coming years as more and more of them reach voting age. Unlike the millennials, that I'm a millennial, at the tail end of millennials, who came of age during the Great Recession, this new generation was in line to inherit a strong economy with a record low unemployment. That has all changed now as COVID-19 has reshaped the country's social, political, and economic landscape. Instead of looking ahead to a world of opportunities, Gen Z now peers into an uncertain future. There are already signs that the oldest Gen Zers have been particularly hard hit in the early weeks and months of the coronavirus. In a Pew Research Center survey, half of the oldest Gen Zers, which are ages 18 to 23, which is all of you here in college, reported that they or someone in their household had lost a job or taken a pay cut because of the outbreak. This is significantly larger than millennials, Gen Xers, and baby boomers, who said the same. In addition, an analysis of jobs data showed that young workers were particularly vulnerable to job loss before the coronavirus outbreak, as they were represented in high-risk service sectors and industries. Aside from the unique set of circumstances in which Gen Z is approaching childhood, what do we really know about Gen Z? One, we know that it's different than previous generations in important ways, but it's very similar to millennial generation that came before it. Members of Gen Z are more racially and ethnically diverse than any previous generation, and they are on track to become the most well-educated generation in the United States yet. They're also digital natives who have little or no memory of the world as it has existed before smartphones. When it comes to their views on key social and policy issues, they look very much like millennials, though. The Pew Research Center surveys conducted in the fall of 18, right, among Americans 13 and older found, similar to millennials, that Gen Zs are progressive and pro-government. Most see the country's growing racial and ethnic diversity as a good thing, and they're less likely than older generations to see the United States as superior to other nations. Now, historically, younger voters do not turn out to vote in high levels. The youth vote, quantified by those 18 to 29, turned out at a 50% rate in 2016. In 2018, 36% voted, which was, though, a 16% jump from 2014 when only 20% of those from 18 to 29 showed up. Across generations, the youth turnout is historically low compared to others, yet they have had the largest percentage growth in the 2018 election and were among the only age group to increase their turnout in the 2016 election compared to the 2012 election. A recent poll by the youth voter group Next Gen America showed positive signs about Gen Z's turnout. It showed 50% of voters from 18 to 24 were definitely voting, said that they were going to definitely vote. That was up 10% from a similar time in 2016. The number of youth voters in battleground states who said they were definitely planning to vote in the November elections jumped to 77% in August, just last month. 77% of registered voters aged 18 to 35 across 13 battleground states said that they will definitely vote in the upcoming elections. And that brings us to today. So thank you for that little bit of educational conversation as we were able to explain kind of what is Gen Z and set the framework for our conversation. So now this will be a freewheeling conversation with our panelists. So the first question that I'm going to go with, and I'm going to start it off with here with Jessica. How engaged are you seeing Gen Z students and high schoolers, things of that nature, this election?
I think it's definitely more engaged than, for example, when I was, a high school senior or like a college freshman, right? First off, I just want to say thank you for the invitation. I'm really excited to be here because I really, truly believe that it's going to be our generation and Gen Z's generation that's going to make a big difference in this election. And I say that because here in Webb County and in Texas 28th, which runs from San Antonio down here and then down to the Rio Grande Valley, our district is really unique in that usually in other areas, you have the 65 and older, the seniors who are the biggest voting bloc, and then it kind of, follows the same, heading down, right, within age groups. Well, here, it's actually us, 18 to like 24, 30-ish that actually makes the second largest voting group. So this is a young district. And when we're talking about, what's going to happen at the state level, for example, with Texas and usually it being a red ruby state, I really do think that South Texas can have a big political impact on what happens at the state and national level. So it really comes down to turning out the vote. I think that, for example, with my experience recently, with my congressional campaign, we had such an interesting mix of people stepping up and volunteering and getting politically involved. Because I think a lot of people think that there's only a certain way to get politically involved. And usually here in Laredo, it's like waving signs at people and like, that's what we think that is. But actually in our campaign, part of the reason why I think it resonated with young people is because we taught ourselves that getting politically engaged doesn't necessarily mean that one thing, right? Everybody has different roles. We can all lean into what we're good at. We had a lot of, younger folks that are willing to go out there and knock on doors and like talk to voters, doing digital organizing, which is crucial in this election. Because one, that's how you reach, younger voters, but two, because of the pandemic, traditional ways of engaging voters aren't possible the way that they have been in past elections. So the fact that y'all are digital natives, like it's gonna be key. The stuff that y'all can do in getting Gen Z and younger millennials involved. I think I heard Dr. Hudson say that Gen Z is like after 1996. I was born in 1993, so I'm in the other tail end of millennials. So there's a lot of overlap there in terms of like, for example, our values. And like, I do remember being, aware of life before smartphones and like even before internet. We used to have dial-up internet back when I was in middle school, and that was looking back at it and talking to my niece who's 14, she cannot imagine that she couldn't use the internet when somebody was using the phone. But all that to say is, that this election especially, I think we have an opportunity to show what the power of Gen Z is. And I'm so excited to see how many of y'all are leaning into it. Because I think this is going to be the defining key demographic to see how, not just at the top of the ticket, but even, heading lower down, see how the results are going to come out.
Thank you, Jessica. Let's go to Alyssa and let's ask the same question. How are you seeing your fellow students? You are part of Move Texas at TAMIU. How are you seeing your fellow students engaged in this election?
Yeah, so I definitely have to echo with what Jessica said. I think that Gen Z is very motivated right now. I think that, this pandemic has brought a lot of issues that people have already encountered a little bit more to light for Gen Z. And so they're feeling even more so, motivated to take action and to take part in that. And so, you take, for example, the national racism crisis. And so people are trying to find ways to make their voice be heard, or for, their stories to come to the front. And they're finding that the best way to do that is most likely voting and becoming politically engaged. And so, of course, with this pandemic, of course, a lot of bad things have happened, but at the same, silver lining is that, digital organizing has become, so high up there that it's easier for Gen Z to consume and to understand and to participate on those kind of platforms. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how everything pans out, what the numbers actually are. I think we've seen a little bit of a taste of what the election is going to look like. But I'm feeling very hopeful. I think that they're becoming more engaged just because there are a lot of issues that have affected them personally, and they want to make sure that they can ensure a bright future for themselves.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alyssa. And I would absolutely agree with you. So participating, though, in politics is this often scary boogie monster, right? It's like this kukui that sits out there. It's like, I don't really want to touch it with the 10-foot pole, right? It's scary sometimes. Most of us, I mean, unlike the those that are on this panel, probably didn't wake up and say, I want to become a political organizer. I mean, I've known it for most of my life. And in fact, even after they become politically aware, it's not immediately clear on how they're going to engage in this complex political system. And trust me, when I say it's complex, having lived in other places in the United States and been engaged in a nonpartisan and a partisan way, I found it very challenging to navigate Laredo, Webb County, South Texas in general. But something that we often hear with our young people when they go and vote is that they are berated oftentimes by those that are older that they are not participating in the political structure, right? And I hear this over and over and over and over and over again. And I find that hard to believe, right? Because politics isn't just about voting. Is it one of the most important things? Yes, but if you look at the leaders of movements like Black Lives Matter and the climate justice movement, you're seeing younger folks take action around the issues that they want to. You're also seeing younger folks running for and winning public office at higher rates. So we keep having this kind of contest between things, right? Between like students and young folks, Gen Z, millennials actually taking action, and then being told by the elders and those folks that, well, actually, you're not showing up. So my question to you, Cecilia, representing the Political Science Association, Ceci, here is, do you buy into this concept that young folks aren't involved in politics? Why or why not?
I definitely do not buy into this concept. And I would say it's because, or at least I've even experienced it where I was previously involved in like a political campaign, and there was like older organizers that literally told me like, well, why aren't the rest of your friends here? And I think that there's just a misunderstanding between how us as Gen Z, how we organize versus how they do, because Jessica had mentioned it earlier, like older generations, like they think like, oh, we'll just like wave this around and that's us engaging politically, and then we'll go vote and then that's the end of it. But I think us, Gen Z, I think as a generation, we're naturally really curious and are interested in really diving into a candidate or a topic or an issue. And so I think that we are perceived sometimes to not be engaging as much, but I think it's because we're engaging differently. And so I know that most of my friends, even though, and just Gen Z in general, even though, yeah, maybe we won't show up to like, poster parties or something like that, we will be sharing so many things on social media, talking about these things, and I think especially now with COVID-19, there's been this huge prevalence of like online, like social posts which go in depth into explaining different topics. And so I definitely don't agree with the idea that Gen Z is not politically engaged. I think Gen Z is just politically engaged in such a different way that it's easy to critique it as not being engaged. But I definitely do think we are engaged. And I've especially seen it more now during COVID, especially online.
Yes, you're describing what is known as slacktivism. This term has been around for a few years. And as someone who teaches on social justice and activism, that's my background and degree in research is on activism and college activism specifically. This concept of slacktivism has been around now for a few years, and it's gotten a little bit of traction here and there. But now slacktivism is online organizing. We've just renamed it to co-op it, I think, from an elder perspective, co-opt what we had been doing as millennials and Gen Z. And now they're like, well, actually, this is great. This is exactly what you should be doing. You should share this post, share this post, share this post, get the different stories in there, right? Whereas before, they used to make fun of it, right? Oh, look at them just sharing this post, sharing this meme, whatever it may be. So I absolutely hear you. Yes, we're doing it in a way that is so totally different. Let's bring in here Christian. And I have this other kind of notion that I'm trying to figure out here is, have you heard this thought process that, young folks are just not taught to care about politics or didn't hear about it at home? And how do we combat that if you are hearing that?
So a lot of people seem to think that us Gen Z are not politically active, right? And we hear that a lot and like again and again. But I feel that when someone says that we're not taught at home, I quite actually think it's the opposite, because we hear about it on social media. We hear about it through our friends or through stories that we'd hear even locally, and if that notion is being said that we don't hear about it at home, it's quite, our parents must at one point discuss politics at home, whether it's on the kitchen, whether it's at the couch, in the living room, in the bedroom. So I don't agree that with that. So yeah.
All right. And so I guess really, I mean, and I appreciate that concept, but how do we then combat that? I think is the second part of that question, right? So yeah, we may be taught this at home, but how do we combat it? How do we combat this misnomer that exists in the larger stratosphere of like, hey, we're not taught politics at home, we're not engaged. How do we combat that?
I think the best way to do that would be to reaching out as much as we can. And, that whether it's through social media or through encouraging your friends to get politically involved. Even with me personally, I've had an experience with my friend who said they weren't going to vote, and the best way to educate them is by encouraging them. And by spreading awareness, whether that's through the organizations that you're involved in, whether that's personally and making sure your family are registered to vote. I think combating that's how you can combat it, educate, and encourage.
And can I add something to
I was
that?
just going to bring you in here, Jessica. Yeah, sorry.
Because I think all of that is true. I think, like, for example, also it's like what the definition of politics is, right? Like my parents may not have ever been like, you should vote for XYZ person because this, right? But we talk about the issues. Like that is something that is always brought up. We're watching Univision, we're watching Jorge Ramos talking, and like, we have these conversations, right? I think that the definition of what politics is kind of like, is this politics? It is, right? But we're just not taught that that's what politics is, right? The other part that I think we need to combat, or how we combat this voter apathy, is that we need to ask, oh, you're not going to vote? Why? right? Because usually the people that say they're not going to vote, and I see it a lot with, you know, for example, people like my parents, even though they are politically engaged, especially now, but like, you know, there are other people like my uncles, like my vecinos and like stuff that they're like, why am I going to vote? Everything's the same. It's the same thing over and over and over again. Like, I'm just tired. It doesn't matter who you vote for, right? And that's symptomatic of like voter disenfranchisement and disengagement, right? So I think part of it is, and the reason why grassroots campaigns, for example, have just resonated so strongly and have brought in like a lot of people that feel that voter apathy into voting for the first time, or even volunteering, phone banking, canvassing for the first time, because all of a sudden here are issues that are being talked about that maybe a traditional politician has never touched before. So I think that's part of, you know, we do need to engage with those folks and recognize that voting isn't the ends, it's just the means to the end. And like, you know, everybody has been saying, like, there's so much more advocacy, so many other ways of organizing that we also need to touch up on.
Can I add on to that?
Yes, absolutely. Go right ahead. That's what these are for. We're just supposed to just bring them open.
Yeah, and so I think with more specificity to, you know, the at-home aspect, a lot of what we're not considering is that, you know, this is the young voting bloc is, you know, they are coming from immigrants. They are coming from people who maybe not have experienced this kind of, you know, voting, or they don't really have this kind of democratic process that we do. So they don't, I think, you know, it definitely happens that people don't really understand, you know, how voting works because of what they have or haven't learned at home, because of those issues. You know, there are issues specifically that affect that voting bloc that, you know, allows them to not be apathetic necessarily, but not to be like illuminated in how these kinds of things work. And it's not necessarily the fault of the parents who might not have that, you know, same information as well. It's just the general, you know, misconception that they are, you know, particularly apathetic. So I just wanted to like make that point, that there are specific issues that Gen Z and millennials face that kind of act as a barrier to being politically engaged and even, you know, getting involved in voting and what have you.
I would agree with that absolutely here, Alyssa. You know, the Pew Center found that millennials and Gen Z are more likely to be children of immigrants and or immigrants themselves than other generations, right? And so thinking about that concept of like, if your family's from, you know, from a different country where the democratic process or voting isn't as ubiquitous as it here is in the United States, that may be a little bit off-putting, right? And navigating the system in and of itself is challenging, or can be challenging for some folks. But I want to go back to something both what you, Alyssa, and Jessica had mentioned here. And I think Jessica and I have had this conversation before, right? And I think, Jessica, you hit it right on the head. That we may not be like millennials and Gen Z, may not be like, ooh, rah, rah, I am for a candidate, and this is my candidate, and this is the way I'm going to be, you know, ride or die, right? They're not like that per se. They're more focused on their own values, right? The issues that are out there, right? Because not everything can be a black or white, Democrat or Republican, or libertarian and, you know, Green Party kind of viewpoint, right? Like there may be some good and some not so good on all sides, right? And so I find this concept so interesting. And this brings me to this next question. What role, and we're going to take it over here to Jessica to start us off with, what role do you think our value system that we're placed in with our parents, like we developed with our parents, especially as young children, right? We're still developing who we are as humans, right? And what are our ideals and our own values, and how do I want to maybe rebel against my parents or not, right? Like still looked up to them, right? So just think about it from that perspective. What role do you think that those values play? And then how does that then shape, right? You've been doing this for a while. I mean, you not for super long, but you've been doing it for a while here. But what role do you really think, Jessica, that our values then play into the way we view the world?
I think, I mean, this ties into that question of like, sometimes older generations accuse us of not being present or not participating politically in the way that they expect us to, right? Because values play such a strong role in the way millennials and Gen Z vote. We don't vote by party, you know, it's values first, party after, right? Or better yet, our values dictate what party we affiliate ourselves with, if any. And that, you know, it kind of comes across like when we're told like blindly support this person basically, right? Or blindly support this initiative or whatever. It comes off as like a sense of entitlement, right? Because we feel that our vote hasn't been earned. So I think values have a lot to do with our political perception and our political actions. I think that especially with Gen Z, I think me as a millennial, it took me a little bit to figure this out, but I think Gen Z like knows this off the bat that like as young people, our experiences are valuable, our perception is valuable, our perspective is valuable, and we have lived experiences that are informing the decisions and the values that we hold. And we're not afraid to like step up and, you know, get involved and like act on our values. And I saw that because like throughout the campaign, like there were, we had volunteers as young as like 14, 15 years old that were on the phones getting engaged and like, you know, even political posters. I have one in the wall of a really sweet little girl who drew it at our campaign office. And, you know, she was politically involved, right? In her own way, she was making a political statement. And I think, again, I think this is where our values come through and where we are so set on on what we believe that we're acting on it. Whereas maybe, again, older generations expect something different because they have acted differently and party comes first, right? And I think we need to be aware of that. And acting on our values also makes it easier to hold our elected officials accountable for us, because if they are not coming through on the political platform that they ran on or have promised, then it's really easy for millennials and Gen Z to be like, you know what, you either step up or step aside because we want somebody else that is actually going to act on their values as well.
Thank you for that, Jessica. And I love that word that you brought in there. I think we have been taught as Gen Z and millennials about this concept of accountability. We're going to hold folks accountable for their actions, right? I think that's one of the bigger things that we've seen, even through most of our political lives, that where politicians have been held or not held accountable. And that really skews the way we view things. And so I just find this concept of accountability just so important. And I wonder here, Ceci, is as we're looking forward, right, 5-10 years down the road, because this isn't just like the 2020 election, right? Yeah, the conversation today is about 2020, but like, give us 10 more years, Gen Z millennials will be the largest. I mean, this year alone, Gen Z millennials together are the largest voting bloc that's out there. We're bigger than baby boomers. And so, but 10 years from now, we're going to be a vastly different country, right? Like I'm sure in your political science classes and in your conversations with your podcast, right? Like you've talked about some of these things before. So what role do you think accountability does play in the political process? And why do you think it kind of touching base off of Jessica, you know, Jessica and I are in this millennial group. You're this Gen Z, like, is accountability such a big thing to you or to your peers, things of that nature?
I think accountability is going to increasingly become what is at the core of whether or not a politician is going to be reelected. I think it's important to note how us as Gen Z, you mentioned earlier, like we don't know a world without internet. And because we don't know a world without internet, like we've always had social media. I know like for me, and I started pretty late. I was like in sixth or like somewhere in middle school when I first got my first like social media like page, right? And I even knew people that even younger than that had social media pages. I think what that does is you start to curate who you are, what your identity is, because it's what you're posting. And that because we've grown up always having a very strong sense of individuality and self, it's made it so that us as individuals know what our values are and ultimately want to hold people accountable so that they continue to uphold these values that we find so significant. And so I think that accountability is going to be at the core of what us as Gen Z and whoever comes after us are going to be looking at with politicians, because ultimately, if there is no accountability, then, you know, why are you there?
Great. I appreciate that. And you brought up something that is so interesting. One, so you had your first social media page during middle school. My first opportunity for social media, well, I mean, I guess, let me rephrase that. Not that first opportunity, because, you know, there was MySpace before the Facebook, but the Facebook came to my campus at the University of Oregon when I was a junior in college. So that's how old I am. And you're all, did you know that I just, as an aside, but they are recreating the original version of the OG Facebook right now and having it just for college students. Like they're creating like a Facebook just for like Harvard. Again, that's how it was initially created, and now it's everywhere. Anyway, I put that aside. But one of the things that you brought up though is this idea of social media and this concept of social media and us having our friends, right? And liking our posts and things. I wonder, and I'm going to put this question to you here, Christian, is does that lead to an echo chamber? Does that mean that we only get one? Does that mean that we get only one side of the topics, right? And so, Christian, like, does social media then create an echo chamber? Is really the question that I have for you.
So I think social media is what I've seen now is people use it as their way to vent or to get out their opinions on a certain issue. So I certainly do agree that it does serve as an echo chamber, because what one says and one reshares is what, you know, the majority will be saying or thinking or believing, right? And I also wanted to touch in on accountability. I think now Gen Z, we use this term called keeping it 100, right? So I definitely do agree that, you know, accountability is going to be very, very important for us, whether it's elected officials or just leaders in general. So yeah, I definitely do see that happening more often.
You know, and so thank you here, Christian. And so I'm going to bring you, Jessica, back into this conversation because we're a little bit different. I want you to tell me what the heck Bebo is. I don't know what that is, but
Bebo was like, it was before MySpace here. MySpace was like my freshman, sophomore year of high school. Bebo was like 7th, 8th grade-ish. It was, you could have like another half on there. It was like the precursor to like your top 10 on MySpace. You could customize your own page. It was the coolest thing ever.
So MySpace was back in 2003 when I was a sophomore in college. So that's, I'm a little bit older, quite a bit older actually. So I'm like, I have no idea what these things are. But I want to come back into this idea of an echo chamber, right? So I know that the algorithms with Facebook and Twitter really just kind of replay your same top 100 and the same type of things here. So do you see social media really playing as an echo chamber, like Christian, or do you think that it's able to broaden our horizons, or what? What are your thoughts here, Jessica?
I think it depends, right? It depends on the user. Like, for example, I am the kind of person that doesn't engage in trying to persuade somebody else to see things my way. For me, social media, for example, Twitter, Facebook, like it's personal, just keeping in touch with like my relatives from Mexico and having them like post "ay que chula" like on my on my pictures. But like for example, Twitter, it's more of like that's usually how I'm able to get updates on like news, right? Everything's on there. You kind of, figure out what's happening in the world. Like Christian said, any kind of thought, whether it be political or maybe something personal, it's really easy to just, throw on there. But where, and for me, for example, emotionally exhausting, that for me, it's like, I just want social media to serve as a news source, right? So I try not to pay attention to, other folks that aren't. But the way that I'm able to get that engagement and kind of assess where people are at is through real life interactions. The pandemic, but like for me, family is a pretty good soundboard or like a good little microcosm of how things are going on in terms of like maybe people that aren't as politically engaged as I am. But I do think that sometimes if you're not aware of like what are the things that you're consuming through social media, it can become an echo chamber. And you got to make sure you're doing that outreach and reaching to other people that you might not be following on social media.
Thank you. And I would agree. Social media shouldn't be replaced by actual connections, right? And I think that's the important part. So I guess that leads us to, because I think we're on this continuous conversation about slacktivism, right? Social media posts, we get some news, we may post something here or there that says, what's going on and bringing awareness to. That's really the idea of slacktivism. But I want to bring in Alyssa here. What are some other ways that younger voters can become engaged politically, right? So I know Move Texas, wonderful organization, nonpartisan organization. I'm trying to get students to, do what, right? So I'd love to, I'm going to give you some time here to plug your organization, but also tell us how else folks can become politically engaged.
Yeah, so obviously the most, aside from voting, the most, kind of go-to political activism is of course volunteering. It gives like young people an opportunity or a good idea about what the political climate is like where they're located. And then of course nonpartisan orgs kind of give you the space to develop your own ideas and have the opportunity to develop and grow from there. I would say definitely volunteering, and that can be not just with organizations like Move, but we do have I believe Laredo Sustainable, and we have other organizations that are more so issue specific. But it kind of opens your eyes and opens your world to what's actually happening. And so when you think about issue specific, you have to consider that everything is political. The way we live is political. The way we eat, the way we dress ourselves, the way we present ourselves on social media and in person, everything is political. So I mean, having an opinion in and of itself is already one of the ways that we get engaged. Aside from volunteering, what Move really likes to do, we obviously we do our best to seek out young people that might want to join us, but honestly, because of how the political climate has been in this election year, people are just coming to us. So that's they want to figure out all the ways that they can take part, and so that's as simple as a poster party or block blocking. We can't do that too much of that right now, but creating content and making sure that there are we're meeting people where they're at, and that's oftentimes, especially now in this time, is online. So, you know, having a voice, having a social media presence are definitely some of the ways that young people can get involved with politics. I think we think back to, like Ceci and Jessica mentioned about signs, and you know, that's a lot of millennials and Gen Zs don't have their own homes to put signs, you know, so we're more so concerned about working and hustling and making money so that we can survive. And so that in and of itself is, you know, political participation, you know, having those everyday experiences and being able to say, like, this kind of isn't that great, me having to work so much and, you know, having so much to show for it. So I would definitely say just our existence is highly political. Volunteering is definitely a way to enter that realm. And so I feel like MOVE has this pipeline where we get people registered to vote. And then the next step is, of course, making sure that they are informed and educated. So we create voter guides and stuff like that, and we need people for that. And the next step is, of course, getting people to the polls. So for all of those aspects, there's definitely a space, there's definitely a job, there's definitely an opportunity to have your hand in moving an entire generation.
Thank you so much here, Alyssa. Ceci, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask, what are another ways that other folks, all right, so MOVE's nonpartisan, Political Sciences Association is also nonpartisan, but what are some other ways that folks can become engaged politically?
I think some of the most important things we have to consider when asking like young people to become like, okay, well, we need you to get politically engaged, is what Alyssa was mentioning about how like, you know, Gen Z and millennials, we're really like, we're hustlers, like we're trying to just survive, as Alyssa said. And so I love that she mentioned how like everything is political. And so at PSA, we have our Border Talks podcast, and in the introduction that we have, we say that, you know, because the personal is political, we believe that all of these issues that, like, you know, the most insignificant or seemingly absurd things, those are political. And so I think that the ways in which that young people can become politically involved is by making what they know accessible, the information that they know accessible, so that everybody is more able to engage. And so for PSA, that's why we started up the Border Talks podcast. We wanted to get information out in a way that is accessible and easy to consume for, you know, our fellow college students, our fellow Gen Z. And we actually had began it just through like the traditional like podcast, just like our voices. But then we thought, well, it's probably a lot more entertaining to do this in a video format. And so that's what we've been doing since. I think that, you know, Jessica was mentioning how we rely on social media, and I agree. We shouldn't like just focus on slacktivism or think that that's enough. I think that us as Gen Z, the work that we have to put in is to make sure that whatever we know is not just staying with us and staying, as you mentioned, in that echo chamber of our social medias. We have to go out and make this information accessible to other people that we might not always see. You know, our parents, our relatives, older people, younger people. We have to make information more accessible.
That is so true. That was one of the things that I was hopeful that people, and we did not rehearse these questions in advance, friends. They got the questions about an hour ago. And so my bad. But I love it because education and awareness are absolutely at the cornerstone. Do your research, folks. When I teach my course on social justice, that's the number one thing, right? Is doing research, knowing your own beliefs, developing your own belief system. It goes back to what Jessica was saying earlier. Like, we don't just follow the party line, right? Like, if a candidate is X, Y, and Z on one topic, we are going to research. We're going to do things. Are they good on education? Are they good on whatever topic may be interested to us? Kristen, I'm going to throw this question to you here. What's another way that you think that folks can become politically engaged that hasn't been mentioned already?
Great. So I think another way that you guys could get involved is, right now we're in a pandemic. there's not much you can do other than staying at home. So what do you do when you're at home? Well, and because of the nature of the panel, it's nonpartisan. You can volunteer for a candidate of your choice to text bank, phone bank, or even postcard mailings. I know you might not know how to do postcards because we're used to emails and texting, but one of the ways that you could do your part is to do those things. Or another way is to even host virtual watch parties for debates, or host information sessions, or even join a club, join a group. There's Move, there's the PSA, and then there's partisan organizations that you could join. But I think that those are some of the ways that you could also get involved that come to mind as of now.
Literally exactly what I was hoping for here, Christian. It's to a point. It's like wavelengths. You're right. And if you're interested in participating in registering voters, you can phone bank with Move Texas. They are a nonpartisan way of doing things. And so you can volunteer to do that. My friend Joelle Caballero, who is a Move Texas fellow, has the opportunity. Joelle, can you put the sign up in the chat, please, if you're still here? I see you down on my screen. And so I would love to see that. Who can tell me, actually, I'm going to go to Jessica because I think it's just easier to call on people in Zoom land. But Jessica, when is the deadline to register to vote here in the state of Texas?
Here in the state of Texas, I don't know what day it is today because pandemic just makes me lose track of what day. I guess it's the 15th because I'm doing this panel. But it's 30 days before any election. So just remember that. So here it's what is it, Christian, 5th?
It's the deadline to register to vote in Texas is October 5th.
Yes.
There's a few important information.
Go ahead.
So there's a few other important things that you should know, and that is there in Texas, unfortunately, there is no online registration. So you have to make sure you either request a voter registration card from the Secretary of State of Texas website, where they'll mail it out to you. And I believe it has to be before September 22nd, because there is a cushion where you need to, oh, look, Dr. Hudson put that link. You can go there and request your voter registration card.
Yeah, and I think there's orgs like Move that also has, like, you just fill in your stuff, you get sent it to your home. You get some of these. I bought stamps because my work requires that I mail stuff in, save USPS. And same thing, like I knew how to send a letter. I was taught when I was younger how to send a letter, but sometimes it's like, okay, what do I need to do again? But yeah, you just need it's really easy. Just put it in your mailbox and the mailman or the mailwoman will take care of it.
Wonderful. And I absolutely appreciate that as someone who actually did grow up receiving postcards and mail letters. And so, in fact, so TAMIU.turbovote.org, TAMIU just became a partner with TurboVote, which is a national nonpartisan thing. If you go to there, put your information in, and you're not registered to vote, or even if you are registered to vote, they will do the following. If you're not registered to vote, they will mail you your voter registration form and give you a pre-stamped envelope. So that's even better. So it's free. You don't even have to buy a stamp. Number two, if you want to vote vote absentee, or they will also send you an absentee ballot request, of which you can do. And this is for anyone in the country. So if you are here at TAMIU and you're from another state, you can also request your absentee ballot through there for your home state. And they will send it to you with, once again, a pre-postmarked postage stamp to whatever, you know what I mean? You don't have to put a postage on it. They'll just do it there. And number three, and I think this is the most important, they will send you texts and emails to remind you where your precinct is, when it's time to vote. And it's not just now for the November election, it is for every election thereafter. And this is such a unique partnership that we have with Turbo Vote. If you also log into Trailblazers, there's the same one, similar there. You can do it. It will say every time you log in, it's like, remind me now, remind me later. Let's look at their democracy now, right? And so just be mindful of that. I have short amount of time left. I had many more questions, and I wanted to leave time for audience, but I did want to Jessica, I'm going to put you on the spot here, if you wouldn't mind. Sorry. What advice would you give to those young folk who may be interested in running for politics themselves in the future? What advice would you give to some of our viewers here today?
Yeah, just do a gut check. Know that you're doing it for the right reasons. Know that you're doing it to fight for your families, for yourself, for your neighbors. And then, I mean, go for it, right? I think what has held back a lot of young people from running is that, again, there's this idea that there's like a certain, path to running for any kind of office that you need to go through. You don't need to be an attorney. You don't need to have, ages and ages upon work experience. Like, you have lived experiences. Again, everything that you've gone through, all those experiences are valid. You know what you're talking about. Don't let the imposter syndrome stop you. If you know you're doing it for the right reasons, then, just go for it and be shameless. That was something that was told to me while I was on the campaign trail, because you got to remember that this isn't about you. This is about something bigger, right? And that's what you're fighting for. The average age for my campaign team, we were like a total, like full-time staff, 10 people. The average age was 27, not much older than many of you here. So, I mean, it's possible to, have, huge successful campaigns. And I consider, my campaign, even though we, didn't end up getting the 50+% that we needed, we got 48, right? And that is a success in itself, because I think it kind of gave, especially young folks, a wake-up call of like, oh, shoot, we can actually, create change here. And I really encourage all of you to, take a look into running for office if that's something that you want to do. Because I think a lot of activism and organizing happens. It's difficult because you're trying to convince somebody else to see your point of view. But if you elect one of your own, it's not that hard to convince them to do what you want, right? So I really do encourage everybody who's here to think about it, keep it in the back of your mind, and hopefully explore a run in the future.
Or work on a campaign, right? So you had a campaign staff of 10 and the average age is 27. I think that's so wonderful, right? Because it does show that younger folk can not just participate in the political process by voting, registering to vote, sharing information, living their own lives, right? And I think, as Alyssa said, right, everything about Gen Z and millennials is political, but they could also take it a step further and go and work on campaigns, go and be a campaign manager, go and, be a campaign treasurer or things of that nature, right? Use your skill set that you are interested in doing. I just think it's so wonderful. So before we close off, I do want to open it up for questions from our audience. And I do ask that you turn on your camera if you'd like to ask a question. And it's for any of the panelists. We have a few minutes left. I hope you don't mind if we go a little bit over, but if you do have to run, please feel free to. But I'd love to open it up to questions that folks have.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Is this Anna? Anna, go right ahead. Anna, I think you froze a little bit.
I understand the things you people vote because they're mad. Like younger people started to vote now because of the Black Lives Matter movement. So I think correct me if I'm wrong, but people vote because they're mad, right? Or I don't know.
Yeah, so
I mean, I think that's part of it. Go ahead. You can sum up the question.
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
I think that's part of it, right? I think part of why people are motivated to vote is because they're partially upset at, a lot of injustices that we're seeing. I think especially, and I'm only going to talk about millennials because Dr. Hudson had brought up that, like, for example, our generation came of age during a really bad economic collapse, basically, right? And it led to the Great Recession. That has informed the view of like a lot of us, and a lot of people started getting engaged and politically involved because we were told that if you do certain things a certain way, you go to college, you get your degree, you work hard, you put in years, you're eventually gonna, graduate and like have, the beautiful house with the white picket fence and like, job security and health insurance and like all these things. Well, guess what? There's a huge percentage of us that is not what is happening in our lives right now. For example, I went to school, got my degree. I wanted to use it for public interest work. And as a result, I'm in debt for $100,000, 6 figures. And that was going to UT, which is a state school, and it's supposed to be affordable, right? And like, it's only getting worse, right? Like that student loan debt crisis is just getting worse. So there's like not just that issue, but like there's so many others that the same thing. For example, right now we're seeing an issue that has already persisted since the beginning of this country, right? But I think the pandemic and like other frustrations also has just led to this explosion of like all these feelings and like a lot of people being angry. And like, for example, in the Black Lives Matter movement, folks also believe here are Black people that are just living their lives, just, existing. And then all of a sudden, they're victims of police brutality. So I think it's a lot of anger and like, but at the same time, folks are trying to channel that into, movements. And again, I think, for example, if you were to ask, I guess, folks that are involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, if they see voting as the end, no, it isn't. It's just one piece in like their entire activism. So I really do hope that all of you, if you are, feeling enraged, like that's good because you're paying attention. But remember to channel it and make sure that we are creating, sustainable change for the long term.
I think also on the other hand of that, like people are voting because it's like regular for them. They've been voting for years. So, and they're also voting because they want to keep the status quo. So yes, we do definitely have people who are building, sustaining their anger for long enough to take it to the ballot box. We also have people that are voting to keep everything the same. And so that's kind of what I think one of the issues that I see Gen Z kind of facing is with voting. We have people who like things how they've been and think that, that power is there at that ballot box as well.
If I could add on, I think that yes, some people do vote because they're angry, but I think as Dr. Hudson had mentioned, we grew up different than how millennials had grown up. And so we had this like promising world. And I know for me personally, when I vote, yes, like there is sometimes frustration and anger associated to it, but I don't think it's always anger. I think it also comes with hope, and with hoping that this vote is going to make things better, not just for me, but for the people around me, for my community. Like voting also comes from a place of love for your community, and, for hoping that things are going to improve with a candidate that you can hold accountable.
I think that resonates so much, Ceci, here with political campaigns and their slogans and the way in which they want to view the world, right? So if you think about 2008, it was hope, right? Like many of you may have not been that old in 2008, but at least there we are, right? And so, but like I think that's what for a lot of millennials my age, maybe Jessica, I don't know if you were actually eligible to vote.
I didn't vote in 2008. My first vote was in 2012. I was a sophomore in high school.
Okay, so but for like a lot of millennials, if you look at the numbers, they're overwhelmingly in 2008 and 2012 voted one specific way because of the messaging that's there. I did have a question here in the little chat box from Leslie G. She asked, when can we vote here on TAMIU? And so one, voting at TAMIU for early voting will begin on October 28th. It will go from the 28th, 29th, and 30th. It's 3 days here at TAMIU's campus. But early voting actually begins on the Tuesday, October 13th. And so you don't have to just vote here on campus, right? You can vote. There's other locations. We highly encourage folks to vote early. Do not wait until the last date of the election, especially if you're concerned about COVID and things of that nature. While COVID is not an excuse that one can claim in order to receive a ballot, no one is going to ask those questions of why you may have a disability at this moment in time. So there's early voting. You could do mail voting, which is called absentee voting, things of that nature. There are options for you. They're all located on Soul's website. We do have all of those things. And so you can go ahead to our website, which is www.tamu.edu/soul. You can find out how to become engaged in the democratic process, whether it's filling out your census. If you have not filled out the census, there's only a few more weeks left, friends. We need to get it done. 15 more days to fill out the census. Get your families to fill it out. That is being political as well. That is hundreds of thousands and really millions of dollars that is going to be allocated here to our community that is eligible for grants, community development, block grants, things of that nature. And so just be mindful of that. And so any last question?
I have something with right now that you brought up the election stuff, and there's a website for the Elections Administration. One of the things that we failed to mention that young folks can also get politically engaged right now is that I believe they're looking for poll workers. You get paid to be a poll worker. Please, they're looking for a lot of young people because traditionally the folks that are poll workers tend to be older, retired people. But because of the coronavirus pandemic, those folks are, they're unwilling to take the job because you're just trying to stay safe, and understandably so. So if you're able to sign up and you want to work the poll and get paid, please do so. I know, for example, in Bexar County, which is San Antonio, during the runoff, they didn't have poll workers and some of the poll sites had to shut down. So there were a lot of people that weren't able to vote because they didn't have a polling area in their neighborhood. So if you want to help democracy, please sign up, be a poll worker. And like Ceci had mentioned, everything's political. Census, it's important. It's tied to federal funding. And for example, if there's a pothole that's out there and you're upset because it messed up your car suspension, guess what? That's related to the census and funding. So everything is political.
Absolutely. And thank you. I literally forgot about that. That is one of the things that Soul and the university is going to be pushing here is poll worker information. Thank you so much, Jessica. We do highly encourage students, if you have the ability, to sign up to be a poll worker. We will be having National Voter Registration Day activities next week. We encourage you, if you are interested in doing phone banking or what we're calling a couch party, we're going to be texting friends and you will earn community service hours. So if you are looking for community service hours next week, on Tuesday, September 22nd, there will be a couch party. More information will be released on Trailblazers. There's also going to be phone banking that is offered by the Greek Council, which you will receive community service hours. And so the Greek Council is really trying to get their members and other folks engaged politically. And so they will be doing nonpartisan phone banking through Move Texas. There's a whole bunch of ways to get involved. On October 1st, there's also Reading the Globe speaker, drive-in movies, presentation, sort of speak. There will also be opportunities. I know that College Gems are looking to have a drive-through voter registration drive. There are other, and so nonpartisan, right? Because voter registration really is truly nonpartisan. It's not one side or the other. It's just making sure that people are enfranchised, and I think that's really the important part. So as we close out here, I really want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank our wonderful panelists for today. Ceci, Alyssa, and Christian, thank you so very much for representing Gen Z. Jessica, I feel super blessed that I know you and know that you are able to be here and really just engage with our students in a way that I think speaks to them much more so than I can. Right? I think that in that level of like,
I hold it down for the millennials for us too.
yeah, because I'm like more of the Gen X type, right? Like I really think I'm more of the Gen X, but I do greatly appreciate it. You know, and I appreciate everyone signing up for today, and I really encourage you all to register to vote and vote. Doesn't matter how you vote, just vote. And so we'll close it off with that. We greatly appreciate everyone coming in. Thank you so very much.